What makes writing good? I've been a memoir writing coach for 18 years, and during that time I have worked with hundreds of clients on their memoirs. When these writers first come to me, a lot of them think that they're turning in really good writing because they followed all the writing advice out there, but their writing is actually terrible. Part of the problem is that most of the writing advice out there actually makes your prose worse. Good writing is not about show don't tell. It's also not about using all 5 senses. And it's definitely not about using a mix of short and long sentences. In this video, I am going to talk about what actually makes for good writing. I'm a Penguin Random House author, and I'm a screenwriter whose TV special got nominated for an Emmy. Hollywood director Paul Feig called me an extremely talented writer. Basically, I've been at this writing game for a long, long time. So, let's get into this. The first thing you need to know when it comes to good writing is this. Don't try and give your reader a visual experience. Have you ever heard the advice, show don't tell? I think this tip has ruined more good writers than any other. So it's based on the idea that your reader forms pictures in their brain as they read your story. And that part is true. So if I say to you, an elephant runs across the grasslands, you get an image in your brain, right? But what happened was that a lot of well-meaning but misguided people thought to themselves, well, if a sentence can create an image in a reader's mind, then we can create even better images by adding lots more details, lots more sentences. Unfortunately, this logic was sort of like, if 1 beer makes you feel good, then 27 beers must make you feel amazing. Turns out that's not the case. So, here is the 27 beer version of An Elephant Ran Across the Grasslands. The enormous 8-foot gray wrinkled elephant races across the arid grasslands in the month of March, his large ears flapping as his feet pound against the earth with a thud, over and over again, the sound of cranes overhead. There is a lake ahead and to the right, shaped in the form of an amoeba. As the elephant streaks past, the crocodiles stop stirring, their motion replaced with animated swarms of flies that circle 1 foot above the muddy water, their reflection visible in the mirror-like surface of the water. Sorry, dozed off there for a second. A huge problem I see is that a lot of people think they are striving for this kind of writing or something like it, when in reality this is the opposite of what a reader wants. What this kind of writing does is makes your reader have to concentrate way too hard. Let me reread just a few of the sentences to you, and what I want you to notice is how much your brain has to work to visualize everything I'm reading to you. The enormous 8-foot gray wrinkled elephant races across the arid grasslands in the month of March, his large ears flapping as his feet pound against the earth with a thud, over and over again, the sound of cranes overhead. I mean, just that one sentence makes your brain have to visualize so many different things. It makes you have to work. But reading a book is not supposed to be work. We read books to impress other people. No, that's not right. We read books because they are supposed to be fun. And how fun was it to read that paragraph? So let me amend what I said earlier just a little bit. Don't try and give your reader a visual experience. This is going to happen on its own. So all I had to say to you was, an elephant races across the grasslands. You got the visual, right? Don't overdo it. Remember, this is supposed to be fun. Next, you're going to say to me, but Wendy, if all I write is an elephant races across the grasslands, what am I going to do with the rest of my paragraph? What am I going to put in my book? Not so fast, grasshopper. What you haven't taken into account is subjective writing. Use subjective writing in your book at least 50% of the time. I'm going to explain what subjective writing is and how to use it in your book. Before I do, I want you to feel the difference that subjective writing actually makes. Okay, I'm going to give you excerpts from 2 different books, and I chose these samples because they are related. They both describe a person walking through a space. So, after I read them, I want you to ask yourself which one you like better. Not which one you think is supposed to be better writing. Which one would you actually prefer to read? Okay, here's excerpt number 1. Darkness had long descended on the small city of Redemption Hills, California. The sky above was nothing but a blanket of black. Against it, the neon lights gleamed and glowed from the 2-story building like beacons of debauchery, flashing over the slew of cars and bikes lined in a row near the entrance. I stopped at the front and planted my boots on the ground so I could roll my bike back. Killing the rumbling engine, I kicked the stand and swung off. The glow of club lights and the sound of heavy music seeped through the thick block walls. I lit a smoke and strode for the entrance, my boots crunching on the loose gravel as I went. Mr. Lawson. Colt dipped his head as I approached. Awareness rustled through the bodies, standing at the door to get inside, as I advanced on the crowd. Colt, I returned as I came up beside him. How are you tonight, sir? Still breathing. He chuckled. All we can ask for, isn't it? Okay, that was the first excerpt. Now I'm going to read you another one. Here is excerpt number 2. The next day she asked me to take a walk with her on the beach, an unusual move for my mother, who requested a private audience only when she had something very serious to say. I remember it was a sunny morning, mid-July, with a stiff breeze and hot light, and I remember a feeling of dread and contrition. I was hoping she wouldn't be mad at me. We made our way down the dirt path that led from our house to Esma Pond, a blue arc of water at the bottom of the hill, and then we walked for a while in silence. Finally, she said, I need to talk to you. I'm very worried about your drinking. I said, I know. I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand, afraid that if I looked up, I would bump abruptly into a truth I didn't want to see. I added softly, I am too. I could tell from her tone that she wasn't angry, just worried, and I had to admit to her that I was too. Okay, so which do you like better, excerpt 1 or excerpt 2? So for me, the first excerpt is just missing something. Feels sort of fakey, like it's not a real book. We get tons of description, but for me, it's just missing that human experience. That's my interpretation. I feel like this writer got the advice, make your book visual. Give me a sensory experience. And I do get lots of visual images. But here's the problem. I don't actually feel much. So the second one, on the other hand, gives me what I want when I'm reading a book. I get a visual experience, but more importantly, I get an emotional one. So the first book is from a romance novel called Give Me a Reason. The second one is from the critically acclaimed memoir, Drinking a Love Story. So, why did I pick Give Me a Reason, a single dad, enemies to lovers romance? Well, I did it quite intentionally because I find that a lot of writing instructors tell their students to include lots of visual details, that it makes for great writing. But in my experience, what it makes for is cheap romance novel writing. What do you need to do to take your writing from version 1 to version 2? What you need to do is add a lot of subjective writing to your prose. So what is subjective writing? Well, the easiest way to think about it is subjective writing is anything that a video camera would not pick up. So nothing we can see, nothing we can hear. It's often a person's thought, their point of view. So let's analyze this text, and I'm going to point out the subjective writing to you. So again, this is from Drinking a Love Story. So the next day she asked me to take a walk with her on the beach. Okay, objective, I can see that happening. Here it becomes subjective. An unusual move for my mother, who requested a private audience only when she had something very serious to say. I remember, so all of that was subjective. Then we get a little bit of objective writing. It was a sunny morning, mid-July, with a stiff breeze and hot light. We can see all of that. And then it becomes subjective again. And I remember a feeling of dread and contrition. I was hoping she wouldn't be mad at me. Okay, here we get some objective writing. We made our way down the dirt path that led from our house to Esma Pond, a blue arc of water at the bottom of the hill, and then we walked for a while in silence. All of that is objective. I could see that happening. Finally, she said, I need to talk to you. I'm very worried about your drinking. I said, I know. I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand. All of that, objective writing. Things we can see, things we can hear. Dialogue, by the way, is always objective. Then we get her interpretation of this, afraid that if I looked up, I would bump abruptly into a truth I didn't want to see. A little bit more objective writing. I added softly, I am too, and then subjective writing. I could tell from her tone that she wasn't angry, just worried. And I had to admit to her, I was too. So here we have some objective writing, what a video camera would pick up, and the rest of this is subjective writing. In this case, it's about half and half. So let's compare this with the first excerpt, the romance novel. Darkness had long descended on the small city of Redemption Hills, California. The sky above was nothing but a blanket of black. Yeah, blanket of black is sort of borderline subjective. Would I necessarily see it as a blanket of black? It's a little bit subjective. Against it, the neon lights gleamed and glowed from the two-story building like beacons of debauchery, flashing over the slew of cars and bikes lined in a row near the entrance. I would say the only thing that is subjective in that sentence would be beacons of debauchery. That is not something I would actually see if I were there. That is the narrator's interpretation. So we have 3 sentences there that are subjective. I stopped at the front and planted my boots on the ground so I could roll my bike back. Killing the rumbling engine, I kicked the stand and swung off. The glow of club lights and the sound of heavy music seeped through the thick block walls. Entirely objective. I lit a smoke and strode for the entrance, my boots crunching on the loose gravel as I went. Mr. Lawson, Colt dipped his head as I approached. Awareness rustled through the bodies standing at the door to get inside as I advanced on the crowd. Okay, so thus far, awareness rustled through the bodies, I guess, would be the only subjective part of what I just read. Colt, I returned as I came up beside him. How are you tonight, sir? Still breathing. He chuckled, all we can ask for, isn't it? And all of that is objective. So we have almost no subjective writing in that excerpt, actually just a few words. And in those few words is the only time that we get the narrator's point of view. So overall, we're missing that subjective writing that turns this from a visual experience into an emotional one. In a second, I am going to teach you how to add subjective writing to your own book. Before I do, be sure to check out the links in the description. You'll learn how to get a copy of my book, The Memoir Engineering System. I spent 15 years reading over 1,000 manuscripts to discover the principles that all memoirs have in common. The result is a book full of information you will not find anywhere else. In the description, you'll also see a link on how you can get coaching from me and my team so that you write a memoir right the first time instead of wasting years writing draft after draft. So, subjective writing is so important to your prose because it's subjective writing that transports your reader. You know that feeling you get when you're reading a book and you actually forget you're reading a book. You become part of the story. That is what subjective writing does. So it's really important, whether you're writing a memoir or a novel, put us inside your narrator's head to give us your narrator's point of view, to interpret what is actually happening. Don't be afraid to have an opinion in every single paragraph that you write. That is the subjective writing that your reader is craving. So how do you make sure that you have plenty of good subjective writing in your book? To get a writer from purely objective writing to a mix of objective and subjective writing, sometimes all I have to do is give them permission. The problem is that so many writers have been trained to give their reader a visual experience. All I had to do for my client Lauren was to tell her, start putting your thoughts down on the page. She responded to me, well, that's what I wanted to do all along, but I kept taking it out because I thought it would bore my reader. I have told so many clients to add their thoughts to the page, to give us their point of view, and I have watched their writing go from really mediocre to something incredible, sometimes in the course of a week. Let's say that the thought of adding your thoughts to the page just isn't enough for you. So let me really explain how to add subjective writing to your book. So you probably already have objective writing. I want you to think of that as your framework. If you only have objective writing, you're going to want to remove about half of it and replace it with subjective writing. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. First, by going back to the excerpt from Drinking a Love Story, and then also rewriting the excerpt I gave you at the beginning of this video, the one about the elephant running across the grassland. I'm going to show you how to do this step by step. First of all, I want to show you exactly how subjective writing is working. So here's the same excerpt from before, but this time I've highlighted the objective writing. So think of these objective sentences as what is happening in your story. They are your framework. Now, what I want you to do is go in and interpret every objective sentence. So think of it like this. This is what happens is your objective writing. This is what I think about when it happens. That is your subjective writing. Okay, so let's just take a look at one of the sentences from the excerpt and see what is going on. We have a sentence of objective writing. I walked beside her, keeping my eyes on my feet in the sand. And then we have the interpretation of that. So that is what happens. Your objective writing is what happens. Now we have the interpretation of what happens, the subjective writing. Look at how the narrator interprets what is happening. Afraid that if I looked up, I would bump abruptly into a truth I didn't want to see. I hope this is starting to make sense. Let's go back to the first excerpt I gave you, the one about an elephant in Africa. So I'm going to take what I originally wrote and rewrite it using the principles of objective and subjective writing. Okay. So we know it's all objective writing. So the first thing I need to do is trim it down. I'm going to pick a few of the sentences to create the framework for my new revised paragraph. Okay, how about the enormous elephant races across the arid grasslands, his large great ears flapping as his feet pound against the earth with a thud over and over again. Okay, I'll take that, and how about this? As the elephant streaks past, the crocodile stops stirring. Okay, that's all the objective writing I am going to use in my paragraph, but it's going to create my framework. So now let me fill in these objective sentences with subjective writing. Okay, so I'm going to take the first sentence and I'm going to put myself in the story. I'm going to write, I spot the enormous elephant racing across the arid grassland. And my first thought is to run. Okay, so I spot the elephant. That's what happens. And then I interpret what is actually happening. What do I think when this happens? Well, my first thought is to run. Okay, let me keep going with my thoughts. How about the guidebook warned in no uncertain terms that elephants could be gentle and friendly, or they can also be aggressive and dangerous. Okay, I had a little more subjective writing. Here's the next bit of objective writing. His large great ears flap as his feet pound against the earth with a thud over and over again. So how do I interpret this, or what goes through my head when this happens? I wonder if I should hide, but there is nothing but shrub brush around me, not a tree or a large rock in sight. Okay. So we have one more bit of objective writing, and I'm going to write in the subjective writing to interpret the objective writing, to give my point of view on what is happening in that sentence. Here is the objective writing. As the elephant streaks past, the crocodile stops stirring. So what subjective writing should I add? How about this? And unintentionally imitating them, I freeze too. Okay, so let me read this back to you. I spot an enormous elephant racing across the arid grasslands, and my first thought is to run. The guidebook warned in no uncertain terms that elephants could be gentle and friendly, or they could also be aggressive and dangerous. His large gray ears flap as his feet pound against the earth with a thud, over and over again. I wonder if I should hide, but there is nothing but shrub brush around me, not a tree or large rock in sight. As the elephant streaks past, the crocodile stops stirring, and unintentionally imitating them, I freeze too. Do you feel the difference in that rewrite? This is my version of the moment, the way that I see it. Now, I just made this up, right? If it were actually from my memoir, the writing would be a lot richer and deeper. It's actually much harder to write about an event I didn't actually experience. But I want you to take away the importance of subjective writing, the importance of putting yourself in everything that happens, the importance of giving us your point of view. Another thing I want you to notice is how much more emotional this revised version is. I think that a lot of writers feel that a reader will have this emotional experience just by reading about what happened, but that really isn't the case. You need to let a reader know exactly what to feel, and you do this through subjective writing. So now it's up to you. Make sure you are giving us subjective writing in everything that happens in your book. Make sure that for every objective detail you include, you interpret that detail with subjective writing. Want to learn even more about what makes for great prose? Watch this video next. Dialogue is not as important as you think.